We begin the class today with a mantra dedicated to Swami Vivekananda. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So we begin from where we left last Friday. We were discussing about Raj Yoga, and to recapitulate briefly, we discussed what Swami Vivekananda intended to do by placing this book before the Western audience or the Western people who were new to this idea of yoga. Whatever little they knew of yoga was an incomplete view, maybe a portion of yoga which they were familiar with, the asanas and the other mystical things. Some they thought it is a mystic science, a very esoteric science or esoteric art. They did not even think that it can be called a science. So Swami Vivekananda's first job or the main intention to write this book was to show that just as when he came to England and Europe and America, he saw that people were swearing by science because they found this is a very rational way to approach life and also try to solve the problems of life, where we try to understand the nature of the external world, the world as we see, and try to find out our relationship with that world and how can we live in such a way that we can live in a very happy manner with full of joy. So there were a lot of miseries, natural calamities were there, and people were afraid or maybe not able to handle the forces of nature. So the scientists tried their best by studying the external world, how to harness the powers of nature for the benefit of humanity. And that they did in a very commendable way. Of course, they misused it also and created weapons of mass destruction and started destroying the environment. And there are so many debatable points whether science has always worked for the benefit of humanity or it is detrimental. So some of the scientists, of course, all people were not uh, uh, motivated by unselfish desires to do good to humanity. So they had their vested interests and selfish interests and greed and all those things, which is part of human nature. So that made them misuse science for their own selfish benefits and cause harm to other people and disturb that harmony which was found in nature. If you see the entire nature, if you see the animal world, the plant world, plant kingdom, mankind came much later. This nature existed long before humankind came to this world and tried to exploit its resources. Nature actually does not need human being. It was going on for millions of years. If we see the evolution of nature or Prakriti as we call it, it has been going on for millions of years. It's only for a few, maybe 100,000 years that human being came on this planet, evolved, and then started dominating nature to the extent he can, and he thought perhaps he can have a mastery over external nature. Now, this attempt was not unique to the West, as many people think that the birth of science or birth of external knowledge, a study of external world was something which the West specialized. No doubt they specialized, but it was attempted in India much before and the Eastern civilizations as well. But after having understood the futility of having a approach to the world, only an approach to the external world without uh, thinking about the internal world. The internal world, by the internal world, I mean the world which is equally mysterious. We are surprised and we see a wonderful external world outside of us, but there is an equally wonderful world inside the human being. How the human being, the subjective study of human being in depth, man in depth. As an individual, we have so many faculties, physiological faculties at the gross level. We have our pranas. We also have our mind, which has been very explored. No doubt it has been explored, but not to the extent it should have been, especially in the West. I'm talking of the Western sciences. But when it comes to when Indians found the internal world more fascinating, that's what Swami Vivekananda is trying to point out. That in both cases, the West as well as the East, in general, tried to develop either the external world or the internal world. They focused more on the external world, thinking that external world would solve all the problems of mankind. But they failed to understand that the internal world is also equally important. And finally, Swami Vivekananda here says, strictly speaking, there is no external or internal. It's just a question of what is more gross and what is more fine. So just as with the forces of nature, they found the finer forces inside the atom and also intermolecular forces and other things, and the different forces which uh, control matter. The scientists found that the finer a thing, the matter, when it gets converted into energy, the energy is a finer form of matter. They are interchangeable. It has been proved now. So this energy is more powerful than the matter which it controls. The external world, it was found, the finer a thing. In fact, if we go deeper into atomic science, they found that there is tremendous energy even in a few kilograms of radioactive material, which if it is processed properly, if that energy is tapped, we get atomic energy, which can generate a huge amount of energy. A small material like uranium or some other radioactive material. So they found that the smallest element also has within it a potential to manifest infinite energy. It's not just burning of coal. They thought burning of coal would produce a lot of energy. Then they found burning of fuel, which is less in quantity but more powerful. Then they went to the gas. Now they found that even gas is finer than even oil, but it produces more energy than oil. So going backward, they found even an atom is able to produce energy. So the logic here, Swami Vivekananda says, as you go from the gross to the fine, its potential energy increases. The gross is strong. We see the powerful oceans, we see the huge mountains. But then the force which controls these oceans, these winds, these thunderstorms, and all the natural vagaries of nature which we find, uh, which has troubled humanity for a long time. A cyclone can come and simply disrupt the whole society. So also this coronavirus. So there are forces in nature which are apparently hidden, or many of them can be seen, but they cannot be perceived as we see gross matter. And man tried to go into the depths of the secret of the external universe, and he found that there are so many forces about which we do not know. There is this gravitational force, electromagnetic force, then we have transmission of information across continents with such a speed. So they knew there are so many other forces, the mobiles and all those things. They use radio waves, and then there are ultraviolet waves, and there are so many types of energy forms, newer and newer energy forms, and there are thousands and thousands of applications based on these energy. which can be used for the welfare of humanity or also for the destruction of humanity. So this idea, Swamiji says, that the search after the gross became a passion for the Western mind, and the search after the internal universe became the passion for the Eastern mind. After having explored the external universe, they did wonderful work in astronomy and all the wonderful sciences which were developed in India. But then they found that there is a limit to which you can go. And they found a wonderful secret, that there is more power in the finer than the grosser thing. So they said, logically speaking, then if we focus our attention inward and go towards finer and finer forces than that which we see outside us, the prana which we see outside us. There are so many varieties of prana, so many other forces in the universe, the gravitational force and so many. But then they found inside the human being also, there are certain finer forces which control even these gross forces. To dominate or to control the external forces, humankind has used a energy which is known as the mental energy, which I explained as Manomaya Kosha. So they went a step further and they found that the mind is also a finer form of energy. That is what Swami Vivekananda very clearly explains here, that when we go from the gross to the subtle, we find that the second layer is the pranamaya kosha, the energy, the different forms of energy which pervade the entire universe and pervade our body as well. Our body is a mini universe. There are so many forces about which medical people, the medical scientists have discovered a lot. There are so many wonderful forces, the blood pressure, the breathing, and how respiration takes place, how the osmosis takes place, how the exchange takes place between cells, the force which makes a cell perform so many functions. There is so much energy in every cell of our body, and how it processes the different food that we take, the different inputs that we give. And then they found that the human nervous system is another whole universe by itself. The wonderful nervous energy which flows through our body and controls the mechanism of the entire body in such a wonderful way, it is still a fascinating subject. But when they went to the mind, they unfortunately, the Western world, because they were focused on the external or the gross things, they thought it was the brain which actually created an illusion of the mind. Mind was nothing but a product of the brain, which was a major mistake according to Swamiji, because they did not concentrate their attention on the internal world. The external world preoccupied them, and that was so much in their they were focusing so much on the external world that they tried to correlate everything to the physical. That the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, that is what we discussed in the previous class, are the two layers which are very, very gross and very common to the entire nature, whether it is a living being or whether it is an animal, a human being, or a plant or any other inanimate object. The gross, the two koshas, the two levels of existence are very common. And if we restrict our study to these two levels, then we don't understand the complete man. The scientists or the medical people, they believe that the brain is still, they cannot conceive of a mind which is external to this human body. That the mind is controlling the brain and the nervous system, the pranamaya kosha. So the nervous energy is one prana. It is known as vyana. Vyana, udana. There are 5 forces in the human body about which we discussed. The prana, that is the breathing, the manifestation of the prana which manifests as breathing, not the breathing. The breathing is the action of the lungs due to a certain force which is known as prana. Then there is apana, samana, that is the distribution of the blood or the nutrition throughout the body, the assimilation and all those things, that is samana. Vyana is another Vayu, Vyana is another prana, which converts the nervous energy, the signals of the brain, and moves our body and gives commands to the various sense organs, taking in various input, processing it, and then sending it back as action. So this action and reaction mechanism, which is our gross body, is controlled by a fine prana, or the nervous energy or the nervous system, of which the spine is the main. Brain, of course, is the center, but there is a spine which takes the signals from the brain, the nervous energy from the brain to the organs, and from the organs to the brain. So this process is constantly going on. So this phenomena was an object of study for the yogis. They thought the external phenomena we have studied enough. We know how the gravitational force works, we know how the planets move and the stars move, and the gravitational forces, the planetary motion, the sun, motion of the sun, the energy of the sun, and all the external forces did not fascinate them as much as the forces which control the human mind. Because after all, they found mind is something which has to be satisfied. Though we may have lot of food, we may have a lot of, mind is such an important thing, which the Westerners think is restricted to the brain only. But our psychologists or our yogis went a step ahead. They thought, if mind is connected with the brain, then what happens to the mind when a person dies? Does the mind die? Does that force die? But since we have this idea of karma and rebirth, we know that the mind somehow survives the death of the body. The prana also survives the death of the body, but that was not so much apparent. But they definitely know that the mind, where the samskaras are there, where the impressions of our present life as well as the past life, the impressions are stored in that mind or in some form. Then they discovered that mind as the Vijnanamaya kosha, which is slightly higher than the mind, where the discriminative faculty or the reflexive faculty about which we spoke in the last class, which is unique to human beings. This reflexive capacity of the mind can be divided into two parts. One is that which runs the functions of the body, one which is connected to the prana and the human body. That is one part of the mind, which is, and then there is another part of the mind which decides, which discriminates, which is a still finer part of the mind, which animals lack. They have discrimination, but it is very elementary. They cannot create art, they cannot invent, they cannot be creative. So this creative faculty, or the buddhi as it is known, the technical word in Raj Yoga is buddhi. So this buddhi is another layer of our personality, which is still finer and which controls the mind. So now when we see we should control our mind, then how do we control it? There should be something to control our mind. We complain that our thoughts are not under our control. The thoughts come to us as if they are coming from nowhere. They cause joy, they cause depression, they cause so many things in our personality and wreak a havoc. Mental illness is one of the major illnesses apart from the physical illness. And the mind has a huge effect on the body, and that is how the psychosomatic illnesses are, they are considered to be more serious than the normal illness. The physical ailments which we have because of some chronic disease which comes, but more than that, the psychosomatic illnesses which result, even the blood pressure and all the small ailments which we see very common, they are somehow or the other connected to our mental states. And that increasingly the Western medical science also is realizing this, and that's why this idea of holistic medicine or right living and all those things, yoga, so people are after that, because they have understood that even to lead a very good life, to a healthy life, we need the help of a healthy mind. So a healthy body can only be the result. One of the main causes of a healthy body is the healthy mind. It may not be everything, because even inside a healthy mind, if there are external problems, the body can fall sick. Otherwise, people like Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna would not have fallen sick. So the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, the gross body and the nervous forces and all the other forces, have an influence of the environment also, the external environment. But we cannot say that only the external environment decides the future of the Pranamaya and the Annamaya Kosha. The mind also has the internal world, also internal environment of a human being or a human personality has an equal role to play to decide whether the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, the physical body, the living being of a living being, uh, mainly we are talking of human beings here, the mental health is a very important factor. So this was the subject of Raj Yoga, and right from Swamiji says childhood, we have been experts in studying the external world. That forms the a major part of our curriculum. Unless you take psychology as a subject, a very rudimentary idea of the mind and how it functions is taught to the children, because we feel external skills are enough for the human being to earn a living. But we forget that officially through schools we have to give life skills as well. The skill which enables us to handle the internal world. Then only the whole education is complete. Swami Vivekananda believed that in fact, if he had a choice and if he had his education again, right from childhood, because he was also educated in the Western system of education, the modern system, so-called modern system of education, which of which he was a student, and uh, he had that kind of education. So he said, if I was given a choice again to begin my education, then I would focus on first concentrating and controlling the powers of my mind, and then using it an instrument, that mind as an instrument to control the external, or to study the external nature and grasp the external nature, which can happen very easily. Now we study external nature, we develop a kind of concentration, we develop a kind of skill which enables us to study external nature. That's why we find wonderful scientists and all who have highly concentrated minds. So Swamiji says the effort is the same, whether you develop external skills or whether you become spiritual, the effort is the same, and both require concentration of the mind. The only difference is that in external science or the physical sciences, you have to focus your mind to the external world and make analysis, make a discrimination, use our discriminative faculty to discriminate, to rationalize certain things, logically analyze it, and then go on and develop our knowledge, and then develop and find out practical uses for that, and we develop science and technology that way. That is the external science. But an equally important science is the internal science, according to Swamiji, and that he says one portion of the mind can stand aside the reflexive capacity of the mind and try to analyze the states of the mind itself, which is nothing but finer form of energy. According to Sankhya, Swamiji gives us the background of Sankhya Yoga. According to Sankhya, only the consciousness, the pure consciousness or the Purusha is non-material. All the other things, the Prakriti, is material. Starting from the Annamaya Kosha to the Pranamaya Kosha to the Manomaya Kosha. Even mind is a fine form of matter. Swamiji is very keen for the first time, and he came to the West and spoke to Tesla. Nikola Tesla was a great scientist in America. He was very much fascinated with this idea, because they were all trying to find the unification of all the forces, external forces. And they wanted to find a unified theory of energy and unify all systems of energy or the external forces like gravitational, electromagnetic, and they succeeded to a large extent. That was the uh, very burning issue in those days. So when Swamiji told him, how can you unify all energy without unifying, taking into consideration this mental energy, which is also a form of energy? And he explained to him the Sankhya philosophy, and he was so much fascinated. Unfortunately, he died young. He did not live long enough. Otherwise, he had a desire to find out how the mental energy can be studied as we study the different other forms of energy, like gravitation, like heat, like light. The external sciences have made tremendous progress in these external forms of energy. But the moment they consider the mental energy also as a form of energy which acts through the nervous system. We have to remember this. Swamiji makes a very clear distinction that the brain is not the mind. It is the mind which acts upon the brain and the spinal cord and the nervous system, and then connects it to the prana and the body. And that is how the psychophysical body behaves and acts. It's known as a psychophysical. Psycho means mind, physical means the physical body. So the Annamaya Kosha, the Pranamaya Kosha, which is connected to the Annamaya Kosha, and the Manomaya Kosha, which is connected to both the Pranamaya Kosha and the Annamaya Kosha, the body, it controls both the lower, grosser forms of existence. Because the mind is finer, a finer form of energy than even nervous energy. The nervous energy is just a manifestation of the mental energy, which is finer, through the nerves. And that gives rise to different sensation, that is gives rise to perception. That is how we understand and interact with the world. So without the mind, the senses, the eye may see certain objects. But if a person is in a coma, he is not mentally capable. He is not able to, that connection between the nervous energy, the nervous system and the mind is somehow disconnected. And then he goes into a coma, though the body is there, though the eyes are seeing. They are not conveying the signals and there is no response from the other side. There is a disconnection. So that is why they say that mind also, the yogis say, the mind also creates a tremendous influence on the prana and the body, the Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha and the Annamaya Kosha. So a Raj Yogi or a yogi, if we take yoga in the real sense, actually the whole of yoga starts from the Manomaya Kosha. The only reason why yama, niyama, pranayama and the asanas and then the pranayama were introduced were because they found that just as the mind has an effect on the body and the bodily forces also have a small effect, a little effect on the mind as well. Though the effect of the mind on the body and the prana is much more than the effect of the body and mind on the body and prana on the mind. So you have to remember that the grosser a thing, the less powerful it is. So, but still, Patanjali felt that most of the human beings, they exist on the animal level, the gross level. So they have to start with disciplining their body first. That is why he gave this yama and niyama. Yama and niyama are just moral guidelines or the moral actions which we have to perform. There are many moral actions, satya, asteya, brahmacharya. There are so many things where the body has to be trained to optimize its resources and not waste it. You know how we waste our resources. The body, the sense organs can be taxed to such an extent. The body also can be taxed to such an extent that the resources can be wasted. So the yogi says that the only reason why in Ashtanga Yoga, the prana, the yama and niyama, the moral code, which is nothing but trying to conserve our energy, the vital energy, especially the energy which gets converted into higher and higher forms of energy. That energy has to be conserved. Some people call it Kundalini, but that comes much later when we come at the mental and the higher levels, the Vijnanamaya Kosha level. Otherwise, at the gross level and the prana level, the Kundalini does not simply exist. Though we may feel that this Kundalini and all those things, terms are very nice to utter, but they are not very common. They start operating only when we are have enough self-control over our body, the Annamaya Kosha, the sense organs, and that Yama and Niyama leads to asana. So once the Yama and Niyama are perfected, you are expected to do those asanas which help you to steady your body so that you can concentrate. So the essential struggle is the struggle to control the mind, not the body. But the body, because it helps us to control the mind, there is some attention given to the asana and also to pranayama, which regulates our breathing. And then in the process, it affects the other energies also, the nervous energy, the digestion, and all those things. So they believed, the yogis believed, that after satisfying the restlessness of the body, after making the body steady, to some extent, we can't wait till the body is perfect. Otherwise, you will be stuck on Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha eternally and will not make progress. We will be doing asanas and asanas and asanas and pranayama all our life and not start, even come to the kindergarten of yoga. So that's why he says, don't get stuck at that level. As soon as you find one or two asanas which help you to steady your body, to steady your mind more than the body. Once the body is steady, the mind becomes steady. Once you find that asana, then try to focus more on the concentration of the mind, on the control of the mind. Try to develop the reflexive power of the mind and then go forward. That is what Swamiji says. So he says, the finer part of the body, that is the mind, and the grosser part are interdependent on each other. That's what he says. Most of the yoga is partly physical, but it is mainly mental. That is one point which Swami Vivekananda mentions, and he is devoted one whole paragraph to that, to make sure that this practice deals more with the mind, but it is partly, to some extent, dealing with the physical as well. We begin with the physical, but we don't end with the physical. Now he comes, he says, the sukshma or the subtle is always controlling the, that is some of the hypothesis, not hypothesis, some of the theories of yoga he is discussing with us. He says you have to remember, whenever you take up yoga, the basic fundamental principle, as we have the fundamental principles of physics, the Newton's laws of motion, and there are so many wonderful laws. Chemistry has its own laws. Biology has its own laws. We study it very systematically. So here also, the fundamental postulates or the fundamental theories which Swamiji says the yoga has developed is that the sukshma always controls the sthula. The finer forces of the human personality always controls the grosser aspects of human personality. So if you want to control the body and the prana, then you have to control the mind. If you have to control the mind, you go to the still finer aspect, you control your buddhi. You develop your buddhi. If we have buddhi, then we can use it. So the buddhi has to be developed, and that will control the mind. Then the mind will give proper instructions to the prana. Then the prana will function properly and give proper instructions to the body. So this is the way the yogis said is a very surer way of self-control, or the control of the forces of Prakriti. By controlling the higher and the finer, you control the grosser. This is a universal law. The second universal law, he says, why did Indians go after the internal states of internal, not the external world? There are two worlds. One is the internal world within us, and there is an external world which we see outside us. Both are equally fascinating. Both are worth inquiring into, and both should be inquired into. That's why the science was developed, when they inquired into the external world. But he says the internal is the cause and the external is the effect. Now, the higher you go, the cause becomes the effect. The cause is at the higher level, and that is why we have the highest level of personality in nature of every human being, of every living being, in fact. And that is Karana Sharira. Karana means the causal body. The word cause and effect was introduced by Newton in the external world. There, without any force, there cannot be a corresponding force. Force has one force is necessary to, or one energy is necessary to be converted into another energy. So the cause and effect theory has been accepted by everybody, because unless there is a cause, unless you burn a matchstick, you won't have fire. There are certain conditions. So the burning of the matchstick is the cause and fire is the effect. So Swamiji says, in the human body, it is always the finer which is the cause and the grosser which is the effect. So the body is the effect of the prana. The effect of the prana is in the mind. The effect of the mind is in the much higher level, that is buddhi. And the buddhi in further goes to one more level, which is known as the karana sharira, or you can say it is the anandamaya kosha, where the causal information, the data which determines how we will act, how our minds will behave, whether it will behave in a stupid way or whether it will behave in an intelligent way, that is determined by our samskaras, or the data which is there in the karana sharira. So that is the cause. Everybody acts in a particular way and manifests or conducts his actions in this world in a particular way depending on the cause. That is why we say he is born with those samskaras, he is born with talent. He is not born with talent. Those talents are there in everybody, but only thing is those talents were stored in seed form and they are just manifesting. So all the knowledge, all the skills are within. Only thing is we do not allow the higher faculties of our mind and also the Vijnanmaya Kosha, the higher levels of our human personality to develop, and after developing percolate them, allow them to percolate downwards and then make our lives, make our Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha better. The moment we start doing it, the yogi says, by controlling the finer, you control the grosser. Instead of trying to do patchwork and try to control the gross, you remove one disease, take some antibiotics. Of course, it is a good way. There is no other way. We have to do patchwork. When there is something wrong seriously, you have to immediately solve it. But that is not the eternal solution. The solution lies deeper into the finer aspects of human personality. Whether you call it the immune system, and you go above, we have the mental immune system. Mind is also subject to so many conflicts. So it's not just the body as an immune system. The mind also has a wonderful immune system. It has a resilience. It can withstand stress. It can withstand so many things. You find a huge difference in the capacity of one mind and the other mind, as far as the capacity to bear things, the mental capacity changes from person to person. Some people can endure more. Some people can endure more stress. Some people can endure more trouble. They don't seem to be disturbed by small things or small events in life. That is because the mind also has a immunity system, or a energy level, which if developed properly, if the mind is strong, then correspondingly the prana and the any disturbances in the prana and the body, which are due to external forces, which are not under our control. There are so many external forces which are constantly trying to trouble our Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha. So those things can be controlled if we have some kind of control over our mind, and that can be controlled by a higher kosha. The higher the level, the more control it has. So they say the buddhi or the Vijnanamaya kosha is which is developed in a human being as a result of constant meditation. As we go from pratyahara, the other steps, dharana, and then when we go to dhyana, dhyana is meditation. Meditation is the seventh step. So dhyana is not so easy to attain. Before that, there are so many levels and so many techniques of controlling the mind, the mental waves. It is a wonderful science which the control of the internal forces, especially the mental forces, is the subject of study of this Raj Yoga. That's why it is a science, just as we study the external sciences, it is a study of the internal states of the mind, a very, very systematic study where the mental waves have been classified into 5 vrittis, 5 types of mental waves. Patanjali has made a study of mind very easy. A normal person will think we have so many types of minds, so many types of mental waves, so many types of thoughts. How can we control each one of them? How to control anger? How to control jealousy? How to control so many other envy? How to control depression? So there are so many things which are happening in the mind, and we think they are different vrittis because the thoughts are different. A depressive thought is different, a jealous thought is different, an angry thought is different. So all these emotions, they come from nowhere and then create havoc in our minds. So Patanjali says the control of the vrittis, Swamiji says that according to Patanjali, one has to understand, first one has to understand what these mental waves are. Before you control somebody, it is just like you don't know a dog. Unless you know who that dog is, how he behaves, you can't control it. You should know its nature. You should know the nature of the dog. You should understand how he behaves under different circumstances. Then the master understands how we can control that dog. So also the mind is also a study of the mind, a study of the vrittis of the mind, a study of the mental states, how the waves come, from where do they rise, why do they come, why do they come, why do they come suddenly come and depress us, why do they suddenly come and put so much fear into us. So these waves, they have an existence, just as you make research into the external objects. Where did the virus come from, where did the bacteria come from, what does this particular food do, how does it give energy, what are the vitamins, and all those things we do research. But same process has been applied by Patanjali and Swamiji here in Raj Yoga to find out what are these different mental states, can we classify them, and if we can classify them, then if we understand them, then there is a chance that we can control them. Otherwise they are totally out of control. Most of our minds are not under our control. We find that thoughts come in spite of ourselves. We want to be happy, we saw the sorrowful thought comes. We want to be fearless and the thought of fear comes. So it is a constant battle. The body, of course, wages a battle with the external world, but the mind wages a much bigger battle in the mental world, in the mental universe. So there are so many thoughts, good and bad, impinging upon our minds, and the mind is trying its best. So depending on its immunity and depending on its resistance power, the mind can be made strong to withstand all the pressures. And once the mind is strong, according to Patanjali or according to Swamiji, it can control the prana better, and then the prana can control the body, and then the body can act according to your wish. We want to do certain things, we can't do it because our mind is not strong enough to give the right kind of signal. And of course, there are other disabilities like the prana and the annamaya kosha. Due to external sickness or external problems, they may be defective. For example, a blind person, he cannot see, so he is deprived of one sense organ. So there is a limit to which the mind can act. A blind person cannot be shown certain things visually. He has to use sound and hearing to get ideas and to strengthen his body and his knowledge of the world outside. But the mind has an infinite capacity to become infinitely strong. That is what Raj Yoga attempts to say. And if we strengthen the mind, then we can aspire to have some kind of control over our life and the life of the people around us. If we are not able to control our own mind, so they've thought, instead of learning how to control just the body and the and the pranas, and living a happy life, a long life, which is of no use unless we use it for a good purpose. So if we control our minds and go further and try to find out how the mind is controlled by the buddhi, and then going further we can try to find out how the causal samskaras can be transformed, because they are determining how we behave. What we call is grace is nothing but our own samskaras making us behave in a particular way, either as animals, making us behave as human beings, or making us behave as saints or noble beings. So all that inspiration comes from the highest level, the Anandamaya Kosha or the Karana Sharira, where the causal body or the causal samskaras, the entire information, just as the genetic information, the genetic code decides the structure of the body and how it behaves, so also there is this samskaras which contain the blueprint of how we will behave, how we will talk, how we will interact with the entire world, or whether we'll be happy. So everything depends our joy, our whether we can choose to be happy or whether we choose to be sorrowful. It all depends on going higher and higher to the higher kosha. And when you reach the highest level, which Prakriti takes you by her hand, that's why in the end of the Raj Yoga, the role of Prakriti or the role of mother, as we call her, Prakriti is nothing but mother, is to guide us and take us from these lower levels in a very, very slow process, because we can't just jump to the highest level. We have to, our samskaras will permit us to only go slowly. That is why there is a wonderful verse in the Kathopanishad, Shurasya dhara nishita duratteya durgam patha. Meaning that path is very narrow. How narrow is it? It is as narrow as the razor's edge. The razor's edge, perhaps that word has come from this Kshurasya dhara. Kshura means razor, dhara means the edge. So Kshurasya dhara in Kathopanishad means the razor's edge. Literally, in when we refer to this razor's edge, we mean that we have to very carefully navigate. Carefully in the sense, this mind is so subtle that we have to negotiate it very carefully. We cannot negotiate mind as we negotiate our gross things. The way we handle our gross objects, the gross things of the world, we show wonderful skill when we handle the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha. We can do gymnastics, we can do so many wonderful things with the body. But when we try to do the same gymnastics with our own mind, we fall short because it is still difficult. As Arjuna said, it is so difficult, just like controlling the wind. The wind blows, we cannot steady the wind. It is constantly blowing with different energy levels. It is either blowing hard or it's blowing very mildly. So the mind is like a wind, like air. So it is very difficult to control. Just as the finer a thing becomes, becomes more and more difficult to control. That's why the yogis said, if you want to study this Raj Yoga as a science, and Swamiji says, if we approach it as a science, then we have to follow the methodology, the scientific methodology which the Patanjali and the other yoga teachers have taught us, and go systematically and train the mind. First, study the nature of the mind, study the nature of the vrittis, where do they arise, how do I control them, is it possible to control them, what are the different types of vrittis. So this yogi's goal is to control the mind or control the internal and thus control the external. He says, why waste time when our internal is in a big mess? You may have a very good body, you may have a very good healthy body, but if the mind is playing havoc, this wonderful body, the wonderful covering which is there, which is very important, no doubt, but what is the use if the mind itself is creating, even the most beautiful body and the very strong body becomes zero if the mind is not cooperating. So they said, by controlling or by focusing more on the internal and having some kind of control over the mind, we can control the lower things. That is the goal of Raj Yoga. So as I told you, Swamiji gives us, before starting the Raja Yoga, he is introducing the basic principles, which I am just repeating, of Sankhya Yoga, where the external organs, the role of how do we go, I mean, the question now is, to study the internal world, we require different equipment. Just as we require telescope to see things, we need so many equipment, microscope to see minute things, the external world. So what are the instruments which we use for the internal world? So Patanjali says it is the mind itself. The sense organs are useful. It gives us data, but they are not. They are just the external covering of the instrument. The main instrument is the mind. And it's the mind which we use, a trained mind, a disciplined mind, which we use to focus into higher and higher states which are beyond the mind. See, you have to remember, the mind is only the third state, third finest state. Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, and manomaya kosha. So we are at just level 3 when we are starting with pratyahara, dharana. These are the exercises in yoga where we focus on the lower aspects of the mind and try to control it. But as we go higher and higher, our mind goes, or our focus is on the Vijnanamaya kosha, the buddhi level. This happens very naturally and easily through the practice of prayers or japa. Japa is one thing where we begin, if we loudly repeat it, we begin with the mouth, the physical level. Then it goes to the prana. The pranayama is already, it's a byproduct of our japa. A person who can do japa regularly doesn't have to do pranayama, because the regular repetition of the japa itself is not only regulating the physical body, it's regulating the prana also. And then further on, it goes a step further and regulates our mind. It helps us to control our vrittis. And that same japa going further opens another faculty which is known as the buddhi. But the japa does not stop there. The repetition of the holy name, the prayers, they do not stop there. They go to still higher levels. Till you reach the Anandamaya kosha, and then finally you reach the Purusha, which is the goal of Sankhya. Purusha is pure consciousness. So it is only, what is the use, as we discussed in the last class, what is the use of undertaking this journey? What is the use of realizing our nature as the Purusha or the consciousness? Swamiji says uh, the only reason why we should do it is it removes sorrow, it removes the fear of death, which is the biggest sorrow. The biggest sorrow or the biggest fear is the fear of death. All other fears are corollaries, are lesser fears. Fear of losing money, fear of starving, fear of losing health. All these things are smaller fears which ultimately culminate in the fear of death. So they say if you conquer this fear of death, then you conquer all the lower fears. You don't have to start from kindergarten. You focus on the mind. And the very reason why we attempt to touch pure consciousness, which is known as Parama Purusha or Ishta or the God of, in all the religions, the word God is nothing but this Satchidananda, which again comes to the picture because that is the state where we have to reach. And that is the last step of yoga, where in Samadhi you become one with the Purusha or the Brahman or Satchidananda. But before that, there are so many steps. We begin with the mind. So Swamiji says, we accept Purusha, all are material. That is another thing. Even our Karana Sharira, our samskaras, our thoughts, our vrittis, they are just as other forces and other matter. They are just finer, we can't see them. But they obey all the laws of matter, they obey all the laws of the forces which we see around us. So that is also a force which we should know how to handle. That's why he says from buddhi to gross matter, from sukshma to sthula is how we control. The buddhi controls the mind controls the prana, prana controls the... So mind is the instrument of the Purusha, which is consciousness, to deal with the external world. Now that is what we fail to understand. When we ask, when Raman Maharshi and all those people ask, who am I? Who am I? What actually he was doing was he was asking the question, who is this Purusha? Who is this consciousness, which is the common eternal platform on which all of us are playing? It is one thing which is common to you, common to me. My mind is my own, but the Purusha is all one. The Brahman is all one. And till we reach that Brahman, we will have fears, we will have sorrows, we will have interactions, good times, bad times, so many things will happen in the world. But till we realize the identity with the Purusha. So Rajoga says the yogi can take his mind, using his mind as an instrument, he can rise higher and higher, go to these higher planes, and Prakriti will help him in doing this. The Divine Mother who has created this gross world, the Divine Mother who has created the prana, the Divine Mother who has created our minds. So that's why we pray to the Ma, to Shakti, because without her grace, we cannot ascend this ladder and reach the Purusha. So it is Prakriti alone which unites us with the Purusha. That's why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, Ma, I know only one thing, me and my Ma. So he used to pray to Ma, and because he gave himself to a superior power who could do all the jobs, take him through all the steps of yoga, and connect him with the Satchidananda or Purusha, which Mother did in his life. If you see his sadhana, that's all he did. So that is why the easy way is to surrender to Shakti and ask her that, see, these paths are difficult. I do not know how to pass through, negotiate each successive path seems to be more difficult than the previous one. It is so difficult to even control the body. Then what about the prana? Then the mind. Then you go to the buddhi. So these appear to be a Herculean task for every one of us. But since it is part of Prakriti, it's a play of Prakriti. She has created this mind. She has created the buddhi. She has created the causal sharir. She has created the samskaras, our karana sharira also. And through her grace, she can take us in the reverse path and unite us with Purusha, which is the goal of life. Some Vedanta calls it moksha, or you may say realization of God, or Christians may say it is attaining to the kingdom of God. So what is kingdom of God? Attaining to that consciousness which makes you uh, unaffected, which protects you and leaves you unaffected by the vagaries of the world. So that's why when Jesus and all these great prophets, when they give up the body, or when they had already touched this Satchidananda, and they touched the world of the spirit, they touched the Purusha, so they never thought they have lost anything. But before that, all these things are important. That is why in Vedanta, or Thakur used to say, Brahman is the goal, but Shakti is the means to the goal. Shakti is the helper who takes us. So that's why he always depended on Mother for everything. Even for his simple things, the gross things, for the subtle things, and also to take him beyond, it was a divine Leela of the Mother. That is how the Mother, the idea of nature, has been condensed into this idea of Mother, the Divine Mother. And when we pray to her in that spirit, we actually get the grace of nature, Parama Prakriti, or the Prakriti, lower Prakriti also. And then Prakriti, which has caused all these problems, helps us to solve those problems and go back to our original state. That is the goal of yoga. So now next we will start with the 8 steps of yoga. Swamiji now discusses, after an elaborate discussion on the prana and other things, he will start with yama, niyama, asana, then pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, the 8 steps. So these are the wonderful discussions Swamiji will engage in. But when he comes to pranayama, he stops, and he there are 2 exclusive chapters, the psychic prana and the universal prana. Suddenly, when he was discussing pranayama, he starts with yama and niyama. He discusses it to a certain extent. But when he comes to the third step, which is pranayama, he wants to clarify many ideas, wrong ideas in the Western world especially. So this book was meant for the Western world primarily. So he knew that the certain aspects or certain concepts have to be clarified. So he said this prana is not what just the breath control which we do. Breath control is part of that pranayama. So there are two chapters, one on the individual prana, the prana inside my body, and there is one more chapter on the cosmic or the universal prana. And then there is another sub chapter which deals with the psychic prana. There is one outside prana, the physical prana, and there is one psychic prana. Psychic prana means the nervous energy and all those things. So it's a very, very fascinating discussion. The journey has just begun, and in our next Friday class, we will try to take up Swamiji's ideas on these different steps. We have to go very, very systematically. I would request all of you who are attending this class. Of course, I'm recording all this and putting it on Facebook. But unless you attend all the classes, and if you miss one class, then there is a chance that you will perhaps not understand. Because Swamiji now will start a systematic, after one or two chapters, he will start commenting on the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So when we come to that, we would expect everybody to follow the talks in a sequence. Otherwise, there is a chance that you will not understand the later portions. So now I think we will conclude. We will have a small question answer session. I think you know a Zoom link was sent, how to use Zoom, how to ask questions, raise your hands and all those things. Then I'll unmute only those people. Now everybody is muted. I'll unmute only those people who will raise their hands. There is a small PDF file which we sent 15 minutes before the talk, before the Zoom link was sent. And if any one of you want to ask questions based on what was discussed today, you can just raise your hands. I'll unmute you and then you can ask, so that the other noises of other people who are listening to this talk will not disturb the person who is asking questions and will not disturb me as well. So I conclude now, and I'll leave the session open for a few questions. So we have to clarify whatever doubts are there so that we can continue from where we had left next time. Yes. 1 minute. Yes, who wants to ask the question? Please ask.
Pranam Maharajji.
Yeah, I unmuted you. Shantanu wants to ask?
Yeah.
I unmuted you now. Okay.
Maharaj.
Yes. Yes, please. 1 minute. I have unmuted you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes,
So
please ask the question.
Just to clear my understanding, the pranas are actually those forces like respiration, cardiac rhythm, or the GI system, which we normally do in medical science. And the Annamaya Kosha is the stool sharira. Is that?
Yeah, that is the physical body. Yeah.
Physical body.
The material part of our human body, not the energy part. The forces are the pranamaya sharira are the forces. These forces are finer than the matter. Though they are also material, but they are finer. So we don't see them, we can perceive them. Like nervous energy, the heartbeat, the power of who powers the lungs? Why does the heart beat? So there is some force, isn't it? It doesn't happen automatically. There is some force which beats the heart, some force which conducts the nervous energy to go from the brain to the
Yes.
different organs. So all these energies, pranas, there are 5 pranas. Even body heat is a prana, which is known as
Yeah.
udana.
Yeah.
It has a tendency to rise upward. So there are 5 pranas. Let us not discuss. So what is your question now?
So the question is that this is kind of the same as we are in medical science, so as well. And the monomoy kosha,
Yes.
the Bigyanmoy kosha, these are minds and these are intellect. The Bigyanmoy kosha is a buddhi.
Yes.
So
Yes.
then we raise ourselves to that Anandamoy kosha,
Yes.
is it possible for human beings at all to so that all this Thul Sharira, all this will last, or it will all be
No, it
destroyed?
has to last now. They are interacting with each other. I am not saying that when you go to the manoma and higher levels, the connection with the lower koshas has to be there.
Okay.
Otherwise, the yogi has to live long. He has to live long to realize the goal of life. Till he has realized, that's why otherwise suicide would have been a very shortcut to get mukti. That is
Mhm.
not the answer. The idea is that the body is equally important, but the only thing is it is less important than the higher things. So it has relative importance, and we have to make sure that every aspect, each of these koshas are fit, but they are not pampered, and we don't focus excessively on one kosha. For example, if you are obsessed with your body, then the other koshas will not develop.
Okay.
So it is not a
Yeah.
question of neglecting the body, but it is a
Okay.
question of using the higher, developing all the koshas, the higher ones especially, and using it to regulate the lower koshas in a very useful way.
Okay. Okay.
Otherwise, we
Okay.
will be misusing the body, we will be misusing our prana. That is what is happening because our minds are not under our control. That is why.
Yes.
Anyone? So, any more questions? Yes, Amit, I am unmuting you. Wait.
Okay. Namaste, Swamiji.
Yes.
Um, I have a couple of questions, but I'll just ask one. You described this path as like a razor's edge, and
Yes.
the only way is to focus on um, the Shakti energy. But, but our initiation was given to, say, Thakur, which is in the sense you're praying to him, but you're saying we have to pray to Shakti. So is there a slight difference in what we're
No,
trying to
no.
do?
They are two sides of the same coin. Shakti means Ma is Shakti. The feminine aspect of God is Shakti. They are not two different entities. As I told you, the Parama Purusha or the Purusha and the Parama Prakruti, that is a new term. Of course, it doesn't occur in Sankhya, but that is what Thakur has introduced. He said Brahman and Shakti are two sides of the same coin. It is like fire and its burning power. Can you separate the burning power of fire from the fire? So when you say Thakur or when you say Sri Krishna, it implies that Ma is part of it. She is the dynamic aspect of that. Thakur is the goal. I mean, not literally, not the physical Thakur. I'm talking of
Yeah.
Satchidananda, Thakur whom we consider as an incarnation of Satchidananda. So that Parama Purusha, which is consciousness, is the goal. And the path to that goal is like the razor's edge. It is the path which is difficult. So there you require a Holy Mother or you require Shakti to see that you don't go astray and you follow that path and you don't slip and don't go here and there. There is a chance that you may lose your way. So the path, it's the razor's edge means it's nothing sharp. See, normally when you say razor's edge, that doesn't mean the path is full of, it will cut your feet or something like that. It's thin. That's all.
Narrow.
It's a phrase used to explain that's what Jesus said. Na? Narrow is the way, and narrow is the gate, and the way is narrow, not broad. The way to destruction is broad. but the way to goodness is always narrow.
Okay. And Swamiji, obviously there's some rules towards Raja Yoga. Is that only set out for yogis, or is that for inclusive for all those, including householders?
No,
Because
no.
there's
What do you
yamas and
mean by
niyamas.
what do you mean by yogi? Anybody who practices yoga is a yogi. So there is no such thing as a label that I am a yogi, you are not a yogi. Anybody who practices yoga, anybody who in fact practices concentration, internal concentration. I mean, if you concentrate on chess or you concentrate on some external thing, then you don't become a yogi. Yoga is concentrating on the internal states of the mind. So whoever does it, whether he follows Patanjali or follows some other method, or whether he follows Raj Yoga, it is actually, he is called as a yogi. So the profession and what he does and what he does not do is immaterial. But one thing is there, uh, if you say you are following Patanjali Yoga, then you have to start with the Yama and Niyama. So Yama and Niyama are the moral codes. So we have to do some self-introspection and find out whether we are following those. Then only asana and pranayama comes into question. Otherwise, there is no point to just practice asana and pranayama and not bother about yama and niyama. So a yogi is one who goes from step 1 to step 2. He doesn't jump to step 2 or 3. But his focus is on the 4th step, that is pratyahara, and for 4th onwards. He does the lower steps, he has to do very quickly, and more or less anybody who practices yoga is supposed to be a master in the lower 3 before he even tries to control his mind. But they have to be done simultaneously. It's not that you do asana for 4 years, then you do pranayama for another 2 years. That doesn't happen. It has to be done a little bit. You give it the required time and attention it requires, not much. Say if you have 1 hour for practice of yoga, any yoga, or the study of yoga, then you may say 10 minutes you can do pranayama, or 5 minutes you can do pranayama, 10 minutes you can do asana, 20 minutes, depending on how much time you have. And then you can proceed to the other aspects. So they have to be done daily. It's not that you have to tell the truth only on one day. It has to be a yama and niyama is for life. It's a lifelong thing which you have to practice. There are so many things. You read the Raj Yoga which I have given you. You will get what yama and niyama is. That those are very important actually. Yes.
Sorry.
1 minute. Yes.
Sorry. No, someone else asked. It's okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Swamiji.
Yes. Good afternoon.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
I put these 2. First of all, when we got the initiation, the Guru gave to us one mantra that we continue practicing as japa.
Yes.
I choose ideal such as Holy Mother, or to follow Swamiji or Thakur or Christ. If the way is Prakriti, in this mantra, even if I have the mantra the initiation in the, for example, Swamiji, in my mantra there is a seed to go through the way with the Prakriti. You understand what I say?
Yes, that seed represents Shakti. The seed represents mother, or the power of the mantra is hidden in that seed. It is known as bija. So bija means it is the seed of creation. You see, everything in this world, in nature, is born out of a seed, isn't it? So Prakriti also comes from a seed. Every created thing has come from a seed, some form of seed. So that bija actually means the Prakriti, the power of Prakriti, which opens to you, which makes the Prakriti favorable to you, so that you can reach the goal of your life, whatever it may be. The goal may be your Ishta, may be anybody. It doesn't matter who that Ishta is. You have to just think of a male and female principle. I mean, it's not male actually, but a female principle, the power behind the Brahman is what you pray to or whose help you take when you repeat the mantra. So the mantra has this dual strength. One is the name of the Lord whom you worship, and the power behind, the power that will take you to the Lord. So the bija is something which is connected to the main name, and it helps you just as the Divine Mother helps you with her grace. So it removes all the obstacles, it removes sorrow, it removes all the gross things from your life and takes you higher and higher. If you really take it seriously, then you will observe that your life has become less gross and more subtle. And the subtle things will interest you more, because that is the power of the bija. If the bija is repeated correctly and if you have devotion, then if you still get stuck to the gross, that means something is wrong. The Prakriti is not taking you upward, but it is taking you downward. And that means you are doing something wrong. So you have to be a bit careful what that mantra is used for. The mantra has to be used for in a particular direction to take you to higher and higher levels. And if that happens, then the real power of the mantra is revealed to you, and then it takes you to the goal. Are you satisfied?
Yes. And the second question is, even when we have a problem with our body or we stay in coma, sometimes we wake up from this coma.
Yes.
Is there another situation that we practice and we feel ourselves as we have somehow stopped, that we are not going to develop anymore?
No, the coma, whether it is temporary or permanent, that is only a connection between, as I told you, the connection between the Manomaya Kosha, the mind, and the Annamaya and Pranamaya Kosha somehow got disconnected for some reason. Now, that doesn't mean that the mind is dead. Mind is still there. You perhaps think the Western science always tells us that once you go into coma, your mind has gone. The mind doesn't go anywhere. Mind is still there. Otherwise, if a person comes back from coma, how does he use his mind again? If it has gone along with the coma, then after coma, then he should not be. His mind should not revive his personality. But you often find that after coma, he comes back with the same memory, the same Vijnanamaya Kosha, the same Anandamaya Kosha which he has developed, whatever he has developed. If he is finally developed, then even in coma, that's why some people ask, what happens to great people who die in coma? So for them, it doesn't really matter what happens to the body and the Pranamaya Kosha. They have already evolved to such an extent that they can continue their sadhana with the help of Manomaya Kosha and the higher levels, and they continue to exist in those higher levels peacefully without any problem. So that's why you see many of the very great saints, apparently they go into coma and then they pass away. Then what happens? How do they get mukti? The idea is the mind does not stop. The mind does not stop. The mind continues, because if it has been trained to do sadhana properly, if you have taken care of your mind, if you have taken care of your other koshas, those koshas will continue to function after coma also. So there is no danger, there is no need that the Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha, if there is some defect, or he may lose his eyes, he may be paralyzed. Sometimes you see he may not go into coma, but he is not able to speak. A person may be paralyzed. Swami Sarvasthananda was paralyzed during the last few days. He could not talk with anybody, but his mind was fully active. He was concentrating on Mother. His sadhana went on, and there was a joy on his face. Though he was paralyzed, he could not speak to anybody. His speech that is not very important. I mean, it is definitely, when you are doing sadhana, it is important to be conscious. But if you are really taken care of your manomaya koshas and sadhana has been done properly, then the bodily states or the lower states really do not make any difference. It should not have. Only thing is the sadhana stops at that time, because after that you can't consciously do anything. But the mind continues to do. The mind continues to do. The prana apparently has put a break. The organs are not functioning as they should have. But that doesn't matter really. You know, Surdas was blind, but he could see Krishna with his subtle eyes, you know. Surdas wrote all his poems, and Surdas was a great saint who loved Krishna. So he used to go to the temple, and they say he could see what the color of the dress that Sri Krishna has worn on that day. Some of the poems are expressing the beautiful decoration they have made. And though he had no eyes, he could not see. But his mental mind was so tuned to Sri Krishna and the higher levels of existence that it really did not matter whether he was blind or whether he had eyes. So you got my point. The
Yes.
higher koshas are independent of the lower koshas.
Very
They
clear.
depend to a certain extent, but not totally dependent. They don't rely so much. But the condition is there that the higher koshas have to be developed before you go into coma. You can't expect to do sadhana after you go into coma. That's why they say the human birth and the time should not, time should be used usefully, so that you develop your higher personality right now, so that in the case something happens to your lower koshas, then still you can live with that.
Thank you, Swami. Very clear. Thank you.
Anybody? Please raise your hands. Okay. Yes.
Pranam Maharajji.
Namaste.
I had one question. You were talking about the Karna Sharir.
Yes. The causal body. Yes.
The causal body, yeah, and the the samskaras, the tendencies. How much does karma or your previous karma impact the causal body?
The whole of it. Not how much. It is we are what our karma is. So the whole causal body comprises of the sum total of all our good and bad karma. So it is the only factor which determines what we will be doing in this life. So causal body is very important, because that is where our data is stored. Na? It's like asking what role does Windows play in the computer. It does almost everything. You remove with the software, the computer is just it cannot do anything, isn't it? So the karma practically is the entire record of all our whatever we have done, and the tendencies, what we will do, what we have done in the past, what we will do in the future, and what we will do in the present. Everything is stored there. So naturally the karana sharira, or maybe where the karma is there, it is a receptacle for the karma. So that is where our destiny, I mean the cause, that is a primal cause from where the lower causes are seen. We think it is our body is suffering, our minds are suffering, but then the primal cause is responsible for everything. The state of your mind, the state of your body, the state of your prana, everything is determined by our karma. So its role is quite huge. That's why we have to be very careful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Guruji.
Yeah. Parijat wants to ask? Yes.
There are three more persons who have asked the question. Ravi Lingam, there is a hand there. If you
Where
click
is
on the
he?
participant.
Oh, Ravi Lingam. Okay, but I can't see. Oh, there is a hand. Okay.
Yeah, if you click on the participant.
I clicked. Okay, Ravi, ask.
Good evening, Swamiji. Actually, my question has been asked already, but I just wanted to just expand on it a bit more.
Yes.
In terms of say if you've got some sort of bad tendencies or karma
Yes.
in us, how do we sort of by doing japa and using the mantra, it helps get rid of
Yeah,
those,
mantra, repeating mantra is also a karma. So by good karma, you can nullify the bad karma. And this, according to Holy Mother, the japa and the mantra is a very powerful way to reduce the effects of your karma very quickly, because it has got some special force. You know, the bija, as Desiree was asking, the bija is so powerful that it can reduce the karma very fast. That's why she used to say, Holy Mother used to say, you constantly do japa, don't bother about doing. Of course, you have to do good karma also. Whenever you can't do japa, you have to work very hard, work out your karma that way also. It's not possible that you will be sitting 24 hours and doing japa. But whenever you are not doing japa, try to do good karma. But there is a limit. Now our body has a limit. We can't do beyond a certain limit good karmas, and it will take years and years and years to work out the karma if you just do karma yoga. Though the intensity of the good work, if it is really, if you do it with the true spirit of karma yoga, then many actions can be nullified. But they say, according to the japa tradition, japa was a means which was discovered because it is a power packed bija and the name of the Lord, which uh, removes the bad effects of our karma very fast comparatively. I mean, not that you repeat the japa and then immediately everything will go away. It depends on how much karma is there. So it is a very effective way. It is a very effective way. There's no doubt about it.
And also, thank you. And also, one more question. When I do my japa and say my mantra, I hope I'm doing correctly. But I find that, you said it controls the mind, and I can recognize that. And then it also has an effect on the buddhi and the purusha. I think you've answered that, I think, already. But how would I recognize that?
See, recognition is something which is not very easy, and you don't have to bother. You have to just go on doing it, because we very often spend a lot of energy trying to see how much progress we have made. It really doesn't help. You have to just see that the effort is going on. But if you give too much importance, see, it is difficult to judge oneself. It is difficult to judge others, and it is difficult to judge yourself. So unless there are, of course, certain signs. When you are free, you can come to the center. When the restrictions are lifted, you can come, because it's a very long answer how to judge. Some of the three things which Swami Ranganathanji used to often say can be taken as indicators that you are making progress. Three things definitely happen. So in a general way, I'm not saying that it will happen to everybody, but three general indicators that you are making spiritual progress. It was discussed elaborately by Swami Ranganathanji and Swami Gambhiranandji in a beautiful talk in Bengali. So he said the three basic things, or the three main things which happen when a person makes spiritual progress is, first is his love for the Ishta increases. That is number one. If he is a follower of Bhakti Yoga. Normally I'm talking of those who have taken initiation. So that's why the Ishta comes. So there is a relationship with the Ishta. So that love increases, one. Along with love, the dependence also increases. Second, there is peace in the mind. If the peace in the mind slowly increases, if you are more peaceful today in a general way, not that you will be peaceful all the time, but you can judge for yourself how peaceful you were a few years ago and how peaceful you are now. So the peace has to increase. The peace of mind which you get has to increase. There may be struggles, there may be troubles, but then that doesn't mean that you have to be upset or you have to lose the peace of your mind. And the third thing which he said, this is the third, you may say, not landmark, you can say it is one of the ways of judging whether you made progress, is that you tend to empathize with others. You become more and more unselfish. The less the selfishness, the less the ego, or less the feeling of I, mine, if we are not obsessed, if we are less obsessed about our own selves and our small silly things, needs, then that means you are making spiritual progress. Because spiritual progress itself means giving up the little ego, the harmful ego. The ego that I am the child of God, I am that is fine. But the other ego which makes us give lot of importance to my things. If somebody doesn't give me this thing, I get upset. If somebody speaks to me in a different way, I get upset. It's actually the ego that gets upset. So that these egolessness or unselfishness, peace, and love towards the ideal, these are the three ways you can judge. Otherwise, there is no way to know which kosha. All those things you don't have to bother. Whether you are in the Vijnanamay kosha, Anandamay kosha is the highest level where you feel love, where you get joy. So naturally, when you get joy, when you get peace, and when you get, when you are more stable, when you are not disturbed too much by others, then definitely you are making spiritual progress. You may not have visions, or you may not have, many people think that you will have some mystic experiences and all those things. These things are not, you cannot judge a person by those things. They may come to certain people who are psychologically inclined that way. They may have these visions, small visions. They are milestones, no doubt, but they are not everything. The basic thing is unselfishness, peace, and of course purity of mind, and also love in the heart for the Ishta. Love not for the world, but for the Ishta.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Any you want? Acha. Yes.
Swamiji,
Yes.
there was one more.
Who is that?
Reshmi Datta had raised the hand earlier, but it has gone. But if you can unmute her and ask her the question.
Where is she? I'm not able to see.
It should be in R. If you scroll down on the participants.
Rashmi wants to ask questions?
Yes, but you have to unmute her.
Yeah, but
Reshmi.
Yes.
Thank you, Swamiji. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Thank you, but I have lost your, I don't know what to do. I've lost your image. I'm getting the image of other participants.
But can you hear me? You can hear me, na? So you can go ahead and ask the question. As long as you can hear me, you can ask the question.
Yeah, but also it's good to see the person, speaking. But anyway, I'll manage. It's not anymore, because you have really answered most of my question through when others were when you were answering others' question. But it is just clearing my mind. I'm not very conversant with all the terminologies, but I will explain it I'll use the terminology in a very simple way. For me, if mind is where we are storing our samskar.
No. Just can I interrupt you? Mind is not where the samskaras, the lower mind, the manomay kosha, is actually not the place where the samskaras are stored in the chitta, which is a higher aspect of the mind, not the mind as we understand.
Oh.
It is stored in a karana sharira. That's why I told you it is a stage which goes beyond the Vijnanamay kosha, and that causal level from where all our samskaras come down, and they manifest through the mind. That is true. Just as they manifest through the body and they're expressed through the body, they're expressed through the mind, they're expressed through the prana, but they are not stored in the mind. Mind is a product. My mind is a lower product. So anyway, carry on. What do you want to ask?
What every in this through my spiritual understanding, we are all striving to understand or get over this fear of death.
Yes.
That is the ultimate.
Yes.
And the soul which survives death.
Yes.
So has this mind, this higher mind,
Yes.
has any contribution to perpetuate its help with the soul to...
Definitely, the soul is not something different. Soul comprises of, when the soul leaves the body, the mind is a very essential part. It is the same mind which will help you to either go make progress, or to be born again, or to do whatever. I mean, the state of the mind is everything. You are what your mind is, actually, because if your mind, that's why they say bondage is of the mind and mukti also is of the mind. So mind is such an important instrument that it is connecting the lower and the higher, and it takes you higher and it can take you beyond also. So this mind is something which will never be lost, even if you die. That's why people think all their troubles and all their miseries end with the physical body, with the death, with death. It doesn't happen. Death is not such a simple thing. I mean, death is a simple thing. It's just giving up the physical body, but the mind continues to survive. So it is the mind which goes to the next birth. It is that mind, the samskaras and everything, which are more important than the physical body. So that's why Swamiji said we have to take, and that is why yoga also says, ki when there is time, you better concentrate more on your mind and how to train it through spiritual practices and japa, rather than take care of the body. Body, of course, has to be taken care of, but if we become obsessive and think that because the body is not, once it is lost, it is not, you will not be born with the same body. You will be coming with another body which has to grow and follow its own rules. But the mind is carried with the other aspects. When the soul, they say it's one kind of prana which becomes the vehicle, and it carries our mind encased. It is encased in the prana in a subtle way, and that goes and I mean that stays at different levels of existence till it gets a physical body. So once it gets the physical body, again the prana, the new prana and a new, not new prana, a new body is acquired, and that prana starts functioning through this new body. So mind is all. Mind has to be taken care of under under all circumstances. Raj Yoga is basically a study of the mind rather than the body and the prana. The other things are supplementary, they are less important.
Okay. On a physical level, does reincarnation, the concept of reincarnation is therefore understood in this way?
Yeah, that is how it is to be understood, what I explained. Now Amita wants to ask some question. That is how reincarnation means. You get a new body, that's all. All other things are somehow retained, and if it is good, you'll get a good body or a good opportunity to work out your karma. If you have done, if your mind is bad, mind is not in a good condition, then it will be born in a with that kind of body. So I'll now ask Amita to ask. She is raising her hand. Yes. Yes. I've unmuted you. You can ask.
Yes. Okay, Maharaj. Pranam Maharaj.
Yes.
My question was about that causal body.
Yes.
You were talking about the causal body?
Yes.
Now this Karana Sharira,
yes,
in respect to the 5 koshas, where is it situated?
Actually, see, there is a division which can be made. See, tripartite division is Stula Sharira, body, Sukshma Sharira, the mind and the other things, prana and all, and the Karana Sharira. So, actually, there are 3 bodies. But then finally, the Panchakosha theory has further divided these 3 layers into 5 layers, just for convenience. Otherwise, Karana Sharira is the place where you are, which is above the Buddhi, which is finer than the Buddhi. There is one aspect, we'll come to that when we discuss the mind. Mind is made of 4 aspects. One is the Manas, that is the mind, as we understand, the Manomay Kosha. The other is Chitta. Chitta means the mind stuff, which is made of this Karana, which is part of the Karana Sharira, and where all our samskaras are there. So Patanjali divides the mind into 4 things. One is egoism, it's part of the mind, ego. The ego that we feel is part of the mind. The other is ahankara, mano, buddhi, chitta. Chitta means the samskaras. So that is the receptacle which is a part of the karana sharira, which determines how your mind will function. Manas is a lower level. Manas is just the mind which just obeys the samskaras, which just behaves according to its karma and according to the samskaras which are in the karana sharira. So karana sharira is the highest level. That's all. Whether you call it the Anandamay Kosha, or the, because it is not that there is no strict borderline, you know. We have divided these 3 layers into 5 layers. That's why this confusion. Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha. So that is one way of dividing the whole personality. But the other way is very simple. Some of the Vedanta texts, they divide it into 3. The Sthula Sharira, that is our body. The Sukshma Sharira, which consists of the mind and the unseen things, the subtle things. And the Karan Sharira, which are the receptacle and the samskaras which are lying there.
Okay.
Is it clear?
All right. Thank you, Maharaj. Yes, yes. And you said it will come later on when you're talking of the mind. We'll talk further.
Oh yes, this topic will be discussed because that is the essence of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Yes. So we will discuss that in detail.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who's? Hello? Yes. Is there anybody else? Shall I take your leave now? Parijat, I have unmuted.
Yes, Swami, there was Neeti. Neeti was there as well who raised the hand, which
Where
is not
she?
showing up in the participant now, but she raised while you were talking.
Oh, Neeti is there. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
Neeti, you want to ask?
Thank you.
Pranam Swamiji.
Namaste. Neeti, how are you?
I'm good, Swamiji. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Where are you now?
I'm in Bangalore now, Swamiji.
Okay, namaste.
I'm working
Namaste.
for a small startup.
Okay. Okay, please ask the question.
Swamiji, you mentioned about Swamiji dividing the different vrittis of the mind,
Yes.
classification of that.
Yes.
But it is different from the infinite thoughts that we talk about in our daily lives. Can you elaborate that a bit?
Okay. What I said was, Patanjali, to make things simple, he has divided the infinite number of thoughts which we get into 5 categories. See, in science also what we do, we take the particulars and then make a general rule, isn't it? So we go from particular to the general. So he has classified all the possible vrittis into 5. We'll come to that when the chapter on vrittis come. There is an elaborate discussion which Swamiji has done. I'll just give you an idea what those vrittis are. Raga, Dvesha, there are so many. I mean, the kleshas are there. These are the 5 kleshas, but the vrittis are Pramana, Anumana, there are so many. So we will come to those vrittis. Vrittis, Pramana means that which is right knowledge, then there is one wrong knowledge, illusion. So he has divided all the vrittis, thoughts which we have. The vritti is actually not exactly thought. It is a ripple which creates a thought. It's a ripple in the chitta. The chitta is like a lake, you know. You drop a stone and then there are waves are formed. So each vritti means literally it is a wave. So the waves emanate from the mind, from the chitta, that is the mind stuff, and they come and then they give rise to different sensations, they give rise to different thoughts and all those things. They act upon the body, they act upon the prana, and they give certain concepts and all those things. So these 5 vrittis, to study that, we don't have much time now. There are the 5 basic vrittis he will deal with, and he will show us that each of these vrittis has an advantage and a disadvantage. So you have to know which vrittis, what type of effect it creates on our personality. So they have to be handled very carefully, and to know those vrittis makes it easy for us for handling those. Before even we start to handle our vrittis, we should know what they are, isn't it? So I'm not saying that vrittis are only 5. They belong to 5 categories. So we will discuss that. Is that answer clear?
Yes. Yes, Swamiji.
Karan, that those 5 vritti categories, he says, 5 types of vrittis. I'm sorry, they are not just 5 vrittis, they are 5 types of vrittis. So we will come to that.
So all our thoughts basically fall into 5 categories.
Yes.
Even if we feel they are of infinite nature.
Yes. Okay. So see, for example, there are kleshas also. Raga, dvesha. They say raga means liking a thing which you, loving a thing which you like. That is raga, anuraga. We like certain things. Then there is dvesha. So what you don't like, you hate, isn't it? So these are the 2 things which are very common things which we encounter in life. Either we like certain things, we have a long list of things which we like. We have a long list of things which we don't like. So that which we like, we go towards it. That which we don't like, we go against. So raga and dvesha. Then abhinivesha is fear. The basic idea, the basic klesha is the fear. And they say the fear of death is one fear which contains all the other fears. And then the abhinivesha, that means clinging to life. Abhinivesha is literally means fear of death or clearly clinging to life. So there is 2 more ritis. One is that asmita and all those things. We'll come to those. They are all technical things. So this 5 ritis will take one whole class. We'll have to spend at least 1 hour discussing these vrittis. So maybe after 4 or 5 classes, maybe on one Friday, we will do it. We intend to continue these classes till the lockdown is going to continue. Even if the lockdown is not there, those of you who can attend, I think you can continue to attend. So I'll discuss. So I'll take your leave now. It's almost we have finished 1.5 years. 1.5 hours almost. Okay.
Sure. Thank you so much, Swami.
Yeah. Namaste.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.